They called it impossible, a wall of concrete rising from a furnace of stone, built to tame one of North America's wildest rivers. But Hoover Dam was never just a dam. It was a desperate gamble against flood, drought, darkness, economic collapse, and the brutal indifference of nature. In Black Canyon, workers entered a landscape so hostile it seemed to reject human ambition itself. Yet from heat, fear, and death, they built a monument that transformed the American West forever. This is the story of Hoover Dam, the struggle to build it, and why its shadow still shapes America today. The first thing you have to understand about Hoover Dam is that it was born from a threat. Long before it became a symbol of American power, the Colorado River was a force of chaos, flooding farms, destroying settlements, vanishing into drought, and leaving the future of the Southwest hanging on a knife's edge. To some, it looked like opportunity. To others, it looked like a curse. But to millions of people who would one day depend on its water and electricity, it was the difference between a thriving civilization and a desert that could never be conquered. Then came the timing. Hoover Dam was not imagined in an era of confidence. It rose during one of the darkest economic collapses in American history. The Great Depression had shattered livelihoods across the nation. Banks failed. Families broke apart. Hope became a luxury. And in that moment of desperation, the United States chose to attempt one of the most audacious engineering projects on Earth. A giant concrete barrier in the burning emptiness of Black Canyon, where summer heat could feel uninhabitable and the cliffs themselves seemed to close in like stone jaws. At first glance, the place looked impossible. Jagged rock walls towered above the Colorado River, whose muddy current twisted through the canyon with relentless force. This was no gentle landscape waiting to be improved. It was violent, unstable, and unforgiving. Before a single bucket of concrete could be poured, men had to blast roads through mountains, carve tunnels through solid rock, and find a way to divert an entire river from its natural course. Not reduce it, not slow it, move it. The ambition sounded less like construction and more like defiance. And yet, that is what made Hoover Dam matter. This was not just about building a structure. It was about proving that modern engineering could seize control of nature on a scale once reserved for myth. If the dam succeeded, it would regulate floods, store precious water, generate electrical power, and make large-scale growth possible across Nevada, Arizona, and California. Cities could expand, farms could survive, lights could burn in places once ruled by darkness. But if it failed, the cost would be staggering, financially, politically, and humanly. Because the human cost began long before the dam was finished. Thousands of workers arrived chasing wages in a broken economy, stepping into brutal heat, dangerous machinery, unstable rock, and suffocating dust. Some worked high above the canyon floor, suspended against vertical stone. Others entered diversion tunnels where temperatures soared and carbon monoxide lingered in the air. These men were not stepping into an ordinary job. They were entering a battlefield against the landscape itself, where every shift carried risk and every mistake could vanish into rock, water, or concrete forever. What makes the story even more haunting is that Hoover Dam was also a monument to contradiction. It promised life by confronting death. It offered order through violence. It was celebrated as progress, yet built in conditions so harsh they exposed the limits of that idea. The dam would become a triumph of civilization, but its foundation was laid in exhaustion, fear, and sacrifice. Beneath every polished photograph of the finished wall lies the memory of a place where nature did not surrender easily, and neither did the men forced to challenge it. So the mystery at the heart of Hoover Dam is not simply how it was built. The deeper question is why a nation in crisis believed salvation could be carved from such a merciless canyon, and what that decision revealed about the true price of mastering a river. To understand how Hoover Dam was built, you have to imagine the scale of the challenge in almost impossible terms. This was not like placing stone upon stone or raising steel above a city street. First, the builders had to overpower the Colorado River itself. 4 enormous diversion tunnels were carved through the canyon walls, 2 on the Nevada side, 2 on the Arizona side, each vast enough to swallow locomotives. Men drilled, blasted, and hauled rock from chambers that felt less like work sites and more like the inside of a mountain under siege. Before the dam could rise, the river had to be forced aside. That single act was a spectacle of engineering and danger. Temporary cofferdams were erected to redirect the current into the tunnels, allowing the canyon floor to be cleared for foundation work. But the river was only the first enemy. Beneath the surface lay fractured volcanic rock, loose debris, and unstable layers that could not be trusted to support one of the heaviest structures ever attempted. Crews had to strip the canyon down to sound bedrock, removing everything weak, everything cracked, everything that might betray the future. Hoover Dam would not survive on ambition alone. It needed to be anchored into geology itself. Then came the shape of the dam, and this is where the genius becomes visible. Hoover Dam was designed as an arch-gravity dam, meaning it resisted water not only through its immense weight, but by curving upstream so the pressure would be driven into the canyon walls. It was a marriage of brute force and elegant mathematics. The structure would rise more than 700 feet high, thick at the base, narrowing toward the crest, a wall that seemed almost sculpted by the same canyon it confronted. It looked immovable because every angle, every curve, every dimension had been calculated to make the river's own power push against stone. But the most astonishing problem was one few people ever think about: heat. Concrete on this scale does not simply dry, it cures, and while curing, it releases heat. If Hoover Dam had been poured as one uninterrupted mass, engineers calculated it could have remained dangerously hot for well over a century, cracking under internal stress before it ever reached full strength. So the dam was built in interlocking blocks. Inside them, miles of steel pipes carried cold water to draw heat away, turning the structure into something almost alive, part monument, part machine, cooling from within as it slowly hardened into permanence. Around this colossal system, an entire world had to be invented. Boulder City was created to house workers and their families in the middle of the desert. Cement arrived in staggering quantities. High scalers hung from ropes, knocking loose rock from canyon walls with jackhammers and bars while the void opened beneath them. Massive cableways stretched overhead, carrying buckets of concrete through the air like mechanical insects crossing a stone abyss. Day after day, under savage heat and relentless pressure, the dam climbed higher. What had begun as a dream on paper became a visible fact against the sky. And then came the twist. Hoover Dam was supposed to be a triumph over nature, yet the deeper the project advanced, the more it revealed how dependent victory was on understanding nature's hidden rules. The river could be redirected, but not ignored. Rock could be blasted, but not assumed stable. Concrete could be poured, but only if its chemistry was respected. The deeper truth was unsettling. The dam was not built because humans defeated the canyon. It was built because engineers learned, piece by piece, how little they could afford to misunderstand it. That is what makes Hoover Dam more than a construction story. The closer America came to mastering the river, the more it discovered that true power did not come from domination alone. It came from precision, humility, and a terrifying awareness that one small error in a project vast could bring the entire illusion crashing down. By the time Hoover Dam was completed, it was already far more than a wall across a river. It had become a new kind of American myth, a machine for rewriting geography itself. The Colorado River, once feared as an unpredictable force of flood and ruin, now fed a reservoir so vast it seemed to create an inland sea in the desert. Lake Mead did not merely store water. It stored possibility. It made expansion thinkable. It gave cities a future they could not have imagined before. And in that transformation lies the true importance of Hoover Dam. It did not just hold back water. It rearranged the destiny of the American West. The electricity changed everything. Power from Hoover Dam surged outward into homes, factories, streets, and industries, helping electrify a region that had once stood at the edge of scarcity. In the darkness of the Depression, this mattered not only as infrastructure, but as psychology. It was proof that even in national collapse, the United States could still build something enormous, precise, and lasting. Hoover Dam became a symbol of recovery because it offered more than jobs or energy. It offered visible evidence that human beings, under enough pressure, could still summon order from crisis and shape the future with their own hands. But every triumph carries a shadow. The dam that brought water security also deepened dependence. The cities, farms, and industries that flourished because of Hoover Dam began to rely on a river system that was never infinite. What looked like conquest was, in another light, a bargain with limits. The Colorado River could be managed, measured, and redistributed, but it could not be made inexhaustible. Over time, the very success of the dam encouraged a scale of growth that pushed the river harder than nature had ever intended. And suddenly, Hoover Dam looked less like the final answer and more like the opening chapter of a much larger reckoning. That reckoning feels even more unsettling now. Drought, falling reservoir levels, rising demand, and a warming climate have exposed a reality the builders of the 1930s could not fully foresee. The dam remains a masterpiece of engineering, but engineering cannot create water where there is none. The concrete still stands. The turbines still turn. Yet the great silence surrounding Lake Mead in times of shortage reveals something profound. Even our grandest monuments remain tied to forces larger than economics, politics, and national pride. Hoover Dam mastered the movement of a river, but not the deeper fragility of the system around it. And still, that does not diminish its greatness. In some ways, it makes Hoover Dam even more extraordinary, because the dam was never truly a story about perfect control. It was a story about human ambition colliding with a harsh world and refusing to retreat. It was about workers descending into heat and danger so severe it bordered on the unimaginable. It was about engineers solving problems no one had solved at that scale before. It was about a civilization staring at drought, flood, darkness, and economic despair, and answering with concrete, steel, mathematics, and will. Hoover Dam matters because it captures something essential about humanity: our brilliance, our audacity, and our tendency to believe that every problem can be mastered if only we build big enough. Yet the final lesson of Hoover Dam may be more humbling than heroic. It teaches us that civilization is not built by escaping nature, but by negotiating with it, carefully, temporarily, never completely. We celebrate the dam because it made the desert bloom, lit cities, and bent a dangerous river to human purpose. But its deeper message is more haunting. Every monument to control is also a reminder of what remains uncontrollable. And perhaps that is why Hoover Dam still feels so powerful today, not because it proved humanity was greater than nature, but because it revealed how desperately we need nature to allow our greatness to endure.